and thank you everyone for joining us at our first meeting of the 2021 year. My name is Rick Gonzalez, and I'm your temporary host for a couple more months. It's been a fun ride. Maybe I'll hit 6 months and that'll look good on the resume, you know, but I really have enjoyed working with our ACHP staff. They are fantastic people. From Reed, Javier, Drew, all the way down. I really have enjoyed this, and I'll forever be eternally grateful to Paul Edmondson for helping me get onto this fine group of people. So thank you. We have confirmed a quorum today, and so I'd like to start the meeting here and appointing Shayla Shreves as secretary for the meeting. Shayla, there you are down there. Hello, thank you. Okay. And again, before we get started, I do want to say hello to Ramona Bantos. Welcome. She is with she's the president of the National Conference of State Historic Preservation Officers, and her day job is the SHPO in North Carolina, right? So
yes, that's correct.
I just got my second architectural license, and it is in North Carolina. So I hope to be doing some historic work up in your beautiful state. I've been traveling there for 20 years and I love it up there. So welcome on board.
Excellent. Thank you for the warm welcome. It's good to be here.
Thank you so much. Would you like to say a few words to the group?
In the interest of time, just again, I'm very glad to be part of this most august group. A lot of great colleagues I already know, and I'm looking forward to getting to know the rest of you, and especially when we can meet again in person. So thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Ramona. Okay, and I think I have visible 25 people on the screen. So is that the total, or is there another screen page?
There's another screen.
Okay, yep. So there's two. I see it there now, my right button. Okay, so I'm going to start let's do introductions as quickly as possible. I think it's important because first, you know, some of you are new. I'm definitely new, and it would be great to hear a little bit about each one of you. On my left, I'll start with Jay.
Good morning, Jay Vogt. I'm the retired SHPO and director of the South Dakota State Historical Society, and I'm an expert member of the council.
Thank you, Jay. To my right, Reed.
Good afternoon, everybody. Reed Nelson, acting executive director.
Jordan, after that. Oh, Jordan, you're on mute.
Okay, thank you. Jordan Tannenbaum, an alum of the Advisory Council staff, during my day job is the Chief Development Officer for the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. Also on the board, recently appointed to the board of the Army Historical Foundation, and responsible for the NAMUSA, the National Museum of the United States Army at Fort Belvoir. And am working with a group on establishing a national historical park and honoring Julius Rosenwald and the Rosenwald schools. I am the general public member of the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, and delighted to be so.
And I noticed recently that you were an employee of the ACHP 15 years ago?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for the 15 years. Yeah.
You had your term.
Give or take, mostly take, yeah.
All right, thank you, Jordan. Next to you, I have Richard Kidd. Hello, Richard.
Hey, good afternoon. It's good to see some familiar faces. Reed and I worked together in a previous capacity, so I'm here. This is my first business meeting. I'm here representing the Department of Defense. I'm excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to listening in on the proceedings this afternoon. Great to be here. Thanks.
Welcome, Richard. Great to have you on board too. Next row, I have Susan on my left.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Susan Glimsher, Director of the Communications, Education, and Outreach Committee at the ACHP.
Thank you very much, Susan, and thank you for your hard work on the CEO, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Next, I have Caroline Henry.
Hi, everyone. I am Caroline Henry. I am the Federal Preservation Officer for the Department of the Interior and representing the Secretary of the Interior today.
Awesome. Very good. Very good. Next, I have Michael Brennan.
Good afternoon. I'm the Executive Director of the VA's Office of Construction and Facilities Management, and I am representing Secretary McDonough.
Thank you so much, Michael. I now have Dr. Teresa Pullman.
Hello. It is great to see some familiar faces. Teresa Pullman from the Department of Homeland Security.
That's pretty cool. But
Yeah, that's great.
it doesn't sound like you, Teresa.
No, it doesn't.
What?
My kids used to have a computer program where they could do that, and we would have a lot of fun when they were little. Your voice is being stretched out, Teresa.
Oh, it is? Oh my goodness. This happened to me before.
Sorry. Well, a little light entertainment in the afternoon. Thank you. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Okay.
Having been on hundreds of Zoom meetings, I've never seen that.
I've never seen it either. That's amazing.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Teresa. Thank you. Thank you. That was great.
Drew, sweep the second row over here for us.
Hi, everybody. Drew Null, I'm the Director of the Office of Preservation Initiatives at the Advisory Council.
Thank you. Thank you for all your hard work too, Drew. All right, row number 3, I'm coming to Shasta on the bottom left.
Hello, I'm Shasta Gaughan. I am the Environmental Director and Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Paula Band of Mission Indians, and also the Chairman of the Board for the National Association of TIPOs.
Thank you very much. That's wonderful. Mr. Edmondson?
Good afternoon. I'm Paul Edmondson. I'm president of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, representing the chair of the National Trust. I've been involved in preservation at the National Trust. I just celebrated my 34th anniversary, so I've been around for a while. I just wanted to take the opportunity, since I have the floor, to thank Rick. Rick, you didn't sign up for this. It wasn't a job description when your name was suggested for the advisory council, but you have taken on this role just in a tremendous way. It's just been so smooth, and you were the right man for the right time. So I just want to, on behalf of the members of the council, I just want to thank you.
Oh, thank you, Paul. And it could not happen without all the great people at the council. Really make this job very easy, very manageable. February 5th came online and I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do now, right? I mean, I got a 20-man firm in Florida, and now I've got this big thing that landed on my table. But Reed and Drew and Lynn and everybody else have made it really, really smooth. I think we've had a few bumps, not too many, but I did learn that you cannot take a Zoom call while you're driving. That's because many reasons, so I did that once, never again, right, Reed? And Paul, thank you. I've worked with you for 25 years with a special client down in Florida, so it's great to have you here.
Indeed.
Next, I have Reno Franklin.
Hey, all right. I'm Reno Franklin. I'm the Chairman Emeritus of the Kushaya-Pomo Tribe and the American Indian and Native Hawaiian representative to the ACHP. On the Native Hawaiian side, my family comes from Maui, where we have ceded lands, and from Molokai, where my mom was born and raised, and did not wear shoes until she was asked to get on the plane to come to California at the age of 13. Wow. So a little bit of something about me, because I've been learning so much about y'all. So
that's awesome, everyone. Enjoy working with you on committee too. Thank you. Okay, we have Ramona. I'm going to skip you since we've already said hello. Next, I have Javier Marquez.
Hi, this is Javier, General Counsel at the ACHP.
Mop-up cleaner too, huh?
Yep.
Next to Javier, John Frey.
Hi there. Second meeting as a council member, kind of still very low in my bell curve and learning curve here. I just retired 22 years as a state representative here in Connecticut in January, and looking for things to fill my time.
Okay. Of course, my screen shifted a little bit. I think I missed Caroline Henry. Caroline?
Nope, you got me already.
Okay, that's right. Okay, thank you. Okay, so Eric Hine is the next person on my screen.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Eric Hine, Executive Director of the National Conference of State Historic Preservation Officers.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric. And then I have Christopher King from beautiful Charleston.
Good afternoon. Yeah, Christopher King, Executive Director of the Preservation Society. And like John, a freshman member of the group, and still sort of getting my legs under me, but thrilled to be here and thrilled to be part of the conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christopher. Next, I have Robert Simison.
Mayor of Meridian, Idaho. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for joining us. It's great meeting you in person back in December. After that, I have Colleen Vaughn.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Colleen Vaughn. I'm the Federal Preservation Officer for the Department of Transportation, representing the Secretary of Transportation.
Thank you for being here, Colleen. Appreciate it. I next have in the final row of page 1, John Finley.
Hey, I'm John Finley. I'm the Chief Legal Officer at Blackstone, calling in from New York, not quite as beautiful as Charleston. Also a very recent member and very much looking forward to the work of the group.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, John. Next, I have Luke Nixter.
Yeah, hi, everyone. I'm Luke Nichter, expert council member, and in my other life, if you want to call it that, professor of history at Texas A&M University, Central Texas, and recently added a new role as chairman of CEO. So you'll be hearing about me from me again a little bit later on the agenda.
Thank you, Luke. It was great meeting you in person back in December, and you're also a very well-known author, so it's good to have you on board. After that, of course, Lynn Richmond, who I get into a lot of trouble with. Lynn?
That's not true. You don't get into any trouble. Hi, everyone. Lynn Richmond. I'm the Communications and Public Affairs Specialist at the ACHP.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I next have Brett Blanton.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brett Blanton. I'm the architect of the Capitol.
Thank you. Thank you, Brett. I think we met years ago at Catholic University. I was on the advisory board for the School of Architecture, and you gave a wonderful presentation on the underground work. I would say about 10, maybe 15 years ago.
Might have been my predecessor.
Okay, it might have been him, but I was amazed by the work at the Capitol. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Shayla Shreves is next on the screen.
Good afternoon. I'm Shayla Shreves, the Senior Writer Editor for the ACHP, and for this meeting, the recorder, AKA the scribe.
Okay, thank you, Shayla. All right, going to page 2. Okay, I did Javier, John, Teresa, Eric, Christopher, Robert Simison already. I think these are all repeats over here. Wait, let me see. Did I miss anybody? Oh, yes, Jamie Leutinger.
Save yourself. Jamie Leushinger, Assistant Director in the Office of Federal Agency Programs.
All right, thank you. I see Valerie next to you. Hello, Valerie.
Hey, Rick. Valerie Grusing, Executive Director of the National Association of TIPOs.
Okay, thank you, Valerie. Kate Slick, too, from Colorado. Oh, I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Just to confuse you, it's the Grand Canyon today, Rick. Slick, I'm the president of the ACHP Foundation.
Wonderful. Next, I have Beth Savage.
Good afternoon. I'm Beth Savage. I'm the Federal Preservation Officer for the U.S. General Services Administration, representing Acting Administrator Katie Kale.
Thank you very much, Beth. Corey Kagaris. Sorry, Corey.
Not a problem. I'm Corey Kagaris. I'm the board chairman of the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions.
Okay, thank you so much. Next, I have, let's see, I have Jomar Maldonado. Jomar?
Hi, everybody. Jomar Maldonado. I'm the Associate Director for NEPA over at Council on Environmental Quality.
Okay, and I next have Kevin Bush with, is that, that's not Watergate behind you, no? What is that?
Is the Weaver Building, the headquarters of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And I think Beth just gave me some love there. My name's Kevin Bush. I'm the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Grant Programs here at HUD, representing Secretary Fudge.
Okay, I have, I'm not sure, Tom McCulloch?
Yes, I'm Tom McCulloch. I'm Assistant Director in the Federal Office of Agency Programs at the Council.
Okay, and Angela McCardle?
Hi, I'm Angela McCardle. I'm the Veterans Affairs Liaison at the ACHP.
And we're almost to the end. Patricia Knoll.
Hello, Patricia Knoll. I'm awards coordinator working with Susan in communications, education, and outreach.
Okay, and then I have Blythe Summer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Blythe Summer. I am ACHP staff in the Office of Federal Agency Programs.
All right, so apparently when your screens are dark and you turn on your picture, you get moved in my little setup over here. So did I get everybody or did I miss anybody? All right.
Well, so can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah. Oh, darn it, you got the normal voice.
I don't know what it is. I'm on my iPad. My computer wouldn't let me do Zoom, but my iPad is fine.
We can hear you loud and clear, and it looks like you're on the moon or somewhere else like that.
I know, right? It's great.
Very cool. All right, anybody else? Did I miss anyone? All right, okay, wonderful. So I guess we'll continue here, Reed, right? We'll go on now, and I think I need a quorum, right? So we need a motion and a second to adopt the agenda that's in our meeting book.
This is Reno Franklin. I'll make that motion.
I second it. Jordan seconds it.
So thank you, Reno. Motion, second by Jordan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, all opposed, motion carries. And then I have a second motion, which is a motion and a second to adopt the minutes from the December business meeting, which also is in your book.
This is Shasta. I'll make that motion.
I second.
Okay, so motion Shasta, second Jordan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. All right. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to give you a little update on what I've done since February 5th, forever ingrained in my mind as a day of change in my life. But I do want to thank Chairman Georgiani. We've stayed in touch with her. She's a wonderful lady, and we even have her on one of our committees. So I'm grateful to her. She's become a good friend. I dragged her down to St. Augustine back in October and really got to know her over a long weekend at one of the Florida Trust working weekend sessions. It's great to be here and share the capacity, my capacity over the last few months. We have received communication, in fact, just today, this morning, that the Biden administration is regarding efforts to identify a new full-time chairman. Of course, that's a position that needs then to get certified by the Senate hearing and confirmation. And we also think that may happen likely around before or after our July meeting. So when we get to set up a July meeting, we'll have to wait next, see what happens now in May, June, to see if we do get a new chairman, and then we can obviously throw the hot water to them and let them set the schedule for when the July meeting will be. Let's see. If you have any further questions on that assignment in terms of our future chair, please direct them to Javier. He's been handling that for the ACHP. Okay. Some of the things that I've been working on with volunteers and staff and others, I'm pleased to have participated in the program comment panel. I sure did learn a lot about that process. Chairman Georgiani took a critical look at that process last year, and in a very short time was able to get the comments issuing on them. And I want to thank right now Jay Voigt for his tremendous leadership on getting that panel moving forward and coming up with the committee. I'm on the committee and others on coming up with some very good ideas for the near future. Jay will be talking about this in a few minutes too. I'm also thrilled to chair the committee of the Traditional Trades Task Force, with which Chairman Georgiani formed, and I became a committee member last year as a practicing preservation architect. That's a very, very important one to me because we have a shortage of people that know how to work in the construction of historic properties. And you all have heard me say that those are the best projects as they're there. They're built, you can get working on them right away, compared to new projects that sometimes take a year or two because you got to get through zoning and through other issues. So developing young people too, in particular in the traditional trades task area, is something that Chairman Georgiani started, and I'm very happy to continue with. And reached out to her and she accepted to join our committee. She joined our committee meeting earlier this month. together with another new member, Marty Hilton, who runs the Historic Preservation Program at the University of Florida and at Penn in Nantucket. So it's great to have two new great people on that committee. One of the first things that Reed was kind enough to get me involved with was the Resolution Copper issues, right? And when I first read those documents and got to learn about the traditions of our Indian tribes here in North America and how important land and the sacred culture and the places are, and the possibility that we were able to comment on that, and that we were able to convey those comments, working closely with Reed and our staff to share the comments and hopefully, to continue the support of renegotiating something that started more than 20 years ago, and it's time to hopefully kill that idea of that copper mine in Arizona and move forward. So we'll talk more about this later in today's meeting. And of course, it's interesting that the old administration and now we have the new Biden administration, which is on a tear, right? And there seems to be a lot of money out there available. And again, like I like to say, historic buildings and places are in place, right? Baltimore, Detroit, other places are in place. We can start working on them right now with money. And so we have reached Reed in particular and our senior staff over at the Hill, reaching out to them, informing also our colleagues here on the conference call about our strategic priorities and our interest in engaging them, right? And the many opportunities for historic preservation in the Biden administration through climate change and through all the other ideas that are bubbling up to the top here. So looking forward to make the little agency of the ACHP continue to stand out and capture some of those opportunities. Okay, we have a full agenda for today, and we need to move quickly through some of these items. So next on the agenda, I'm going to ask Reed to give us a report on the recruitment budget and operations.
Well, thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. And let me also echo Paul Edmondson's appreciation for your efforts as well. We've sort of handed you a full-time chairman's worth of work, and you have done it with good humor and great leadership. And we know you have a day job as well. So thank you very much. I'll be brief in my remarks and just cover a few sort of more administrative things. One, I wanted to acknowledge, and other federal agencies may be in a similar position, that we have gotten indication from OMB on our budget passback. And while I can't provide specific information at this point, I just want to acknowledge that the passback seems to be favorable this year. So that's good news. Like many of the recent years, federal agencies have significantly increased internet security and technology mandates. And so, like we have in several years in a row, certainly any increases we see will, to some extent, to a significant extent, go to continue to meet the government-wide mandates on internet security. I also wanted to just reaffirm to everyone here that when we have a new full-time chairman in place, I will certainly urge that chairman to begin the recruitment process again for the permanent executive director. And I would expect that to be one of that person's initial high priorities. And I will also assure you all that I will remain available to the maximum extent that I can to serve in the acting capacity until that happens. I wanted to also just acknowledge, sort of building on what the vice chairman just indicated, that we are engaging on a number of fronts to both monitor and monitor the development of legislation, program and policy issues and things like that that have implications for historic preservation. In particular, I just want to acknowledge that we're already beginning to take a look at the discretionary budget that the president conveyed to the Hill a week ago or so, to see what aspects of that discretionary budget may have implications for historic preservation, and to advocate early on that bills and things and priority areas include recognition of preservation values and interests. Similarly, we're monitoring and looking into the efforts to form an infrastructure package. Obviously, the implications for Section 106 reviews in any package, infrastructure package, are going to be significant. Those, certainly that bill is still taking shape and obviously could change significantly. I would anticipate that perhaps in our next committee calls, which I think we would be targeting either in late May or early June, or certainly by a July business meeting, that we would all be talking with you further about aspects of both the discretionary spending and the infrastructure package that have implications for us. So I anticipate us talking more about that in future meetings. And last, I'll just acknowledge that we have been reaching out to a number of appointees early on things as Vice Chairman Gonzalez mentioned, on climate change, other issues, and certainly expressing our interest in engaging and working with the administration. So plenty going on. Just wanted to give you all a quick recap of that. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
So,
Yes.
So just a question for you, Reed. I know that my leadership is very interested in how climate change is going to be affecting historic preservation, and thoughts about, from the advisory council's perch in the federal government. I mean, are we going to be looking at this? Because I think it deserves a look from the climate perspective, and here are the experts right here, not me, but everybody else. So
I would agree. I would just acknowledge very quickly that we have already written to Secretary Holland twice, expressing our interest in engaging and acknowledging that, and I like the way Vice Chairman Gonzalez has framed it, that when you're pursuing policy improvements to acknowledge the effect of climate change and manage its effect on natural resources, that there's a benefit to also doing it at the same time with cultural resources. It's sort of to kill two birds with one stone, and acknowledging that when you're protecting cultural resources, you're also protecting natural resources is a really important point. And so far, I think that message is being received well, but we're obviously in sort of the early stages of that.
Yes, Reno.
Thanks, Mr. Vice Chairman, and our interim executive director, which hopefully the I goes away. Reed, first off, my condolences on losses within your personal life and family, and what a great man you are, and what a great husband you are to be an equal rock in a two rock family, and to have such an amazing person start the journey. So Rick, you and your wife and your family have definitely been in my prayers. I want to acknowledge that before I go any further.
Thank you.
Climate change is a big thing here in California. We've got a number of reports that have been issued, and quite a few of them in a collaboration with national parks at Point Reyes. And so they did a great assessment of the vulnerability of the coastal archaeological sites that exist there. And since that was successful, they've managed to do some with state parks as well in California, and then the Bay Area in general, with potential for sea level rise, and so there's a good body of work out there that you might want to consider taking a look at. You could definitely get in touch with our SHPO, Juliana Polanco. And I think probably, Allison as well up in Washington State, so it's a lot of good bodies of work that exist around both bays, ocean, and I believe some stream stuff too. So, none of them have taken into the effect of the fires that are a result of climate change that are absolutely, you all know, hitting us incredibly hard. So that would be something we can take a look at. But I do know that Shasta did some stuff on that as well. So, just pointing that out, Reed, maybe some options for you. And Teresa, it's great to hear your actual voice. And thank you for that darn good entertainment first thing in the morning. Morning for us.
For you. Thank you. Thank you, Reno. And well, I don't have to tell everybody that Florida is like a thumb sticking out there in the ocean. And they're promising us another exciting hurricane season, which Louisiana got the brunt of it last year. And we're having some serious critical issues right now, Doctor. In St. Augustine, for example, haphazardly raising buildings on our most historic district within one of our most historic cities, I mean, 3 feet, 6 feet, 8 feet on a streetscape. That's terrible. We have a serious, serious problem in the southeastern United States. This is a critical emergency that needs to be addressed now. So we're going to do everything we can with the help of Reed and the rest of the staff to deal with this as quickly as possible, with actual case studies from California, Florida, the Carolinas, and everywhere else around the country, so that, we are part of nature, right? As Reed said, we are part of nature, we're part of cultural, and under cultural, we're part of our historic places, our districts, and our individual buildings. So thanks for bringing that question up. All right, no more questions on that subject. I'll move on to the next subject, which is the Presidential Memorandum on Tribal Consultation. As you may all know, Executive Order 13175, which was again issued 21 years ago, back in 2000 in the Obama administration, which requires federal agencies to develop plans for consulting Indian tribes on policies affecting these tribes, was recently, thank God, underscored by executive action from the Biden administration. The ACHP, as you know, has long taken its responsibilities to consult Indian tribes very seriously, and we are renewing efforts as we speak to do so again. We've been leaders, in fact, at the federal level in dealing with the tribal nations of America. I have asked Reno Franklin to take the lead on these recent efforts, and I'm very pleased to have him here today to bring us all up to date on where the consultation stands and what we are hearing. So Reno, if you could come and give us an update.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, I'll turn my camera off in a second, just because I'm going to be making the comments, and I want to make sure that I don't lose bandwidth. And plus, I have a crazy cat that's attacking me because for some reason, if she eats to the bottom of her dish, even though it's like full of food, and just because she can see the bottom, she immediately assumes that she's starving and potentially dying. So that is why we own cats. So let's see. First off, let me just thank you. Rick, dude, you're doing a heck of a job, man. And I don't dish out praise very often because it's much funner to not. And I've spent years now teasing John, and he's not here, so I don't know what to do. But that being said, I do want to point out, man, you're doing a great job. And obviously, you had some time with Amy, and she is a dear friend, and she did exactly what was needed for Indian country. And I think it set us up for this, Executive Order 13175. And how does ACHP look at this? How do we differ from our implementation of this than other areas? Other federal agencies. And for us, we are going to have some differences, and especially because most of our consultation is 106 based, right? And historic preservation translated into Indian country, means protecting the sacred. And that's something that we have to kind of keep in mind, is that, when I hear prehistory, I kind of chuckle because my history is prehistory. So all history is historic. And with that being said, again, Rick, I want to thank you for asking me to host those calls. It was an honor. We had a lot of people and tribes that called in, and those were long calls. I've seen them be really short. This is now my third time doing these type of things, and in this case, we're very engaged tribal leaders that had something to say, and so I'm just going to kind of touch a little bit on what those somethings were, and also take the time to thank our Native American affairs staff, because without Valerie and our strong group, this would have been very complicated for me. So thanks again, Valerie. I know you're there, even though I can't see you at the moment. So one of the issues that came up and repeatedly was Article 19 of the UN Declaration on the rights of indigenous peoples. And in that article of UNDRIP is the concept of free, prior, and informed consent. And so this is something that in Indian countries gaining quite a bit of traction. I've heard Secretary Holland speak about it when she was Congresswoman Holland. And, and it speaks to, universally adopted, worldwide concept of tribal consultation with indigenous peoples, or consultation with indigenous peoples. And sometimes we have, these window pane kind of consultations where the decision's already made and we're just going to talk to you about it afterwards. I know that ACHP, we're good about talking to folks and making sure they know that that's not appropriate, but yet, it does happen. And so, this concept really speaks to a meaningful consultation and more towards result based instead of just being let's talk. It's let's make sure that tribal concerns are addressed before we move forward. And I think that you're gonna hear and see more of that with this administration in the coming months. The second part that Tribe said to us is that they prefer us to be face to face when they consult with us, and not done on a regional or state by state basis. And sometimes that happens, and we had definitely had some issues with tribes, even in this consultation, and that the way that they consult is that they, as an entire tribe, would be the consulting parties. And it's up to the agency, in this case, ACHP, with this consultation that we did, to allow them space in which to speak and be able to express their concerns. And so we did make sure that tribes knew that, if they didn't want us to record them as consulting on this, or if they needed extra time, that, we had other outlets. And so that's a really important thing for us. And so we are working on kind of a, national consultations like this that happen quickly, but trying to look for other paths forward for tribes to make sure that they're heard and we're accommodating them. The ACHP is a model for other agencies. That's something that we heard over and over as well. It's kind of like, I thought to myself, like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't suggest this because it really inflates egos, but hey, take it when we can get it, folks. So, our plan's good, but it needs to be more robust and flexible and kind of respecting of tribal governments, like I was saying in some of these cases where the timing is really fast. And the scope, can get pretty broad quickly, and in a lot of location on where we do our consultations. A lot of tribes have been asking us to come and talk to them, and that's something that we should, in a COVID-safe environment, find ways to do. And then always want to make sure that who we are engaging, that we have elected officials and traditional leaders. And that, we're making sure that we're consulting with the right parties. Our plan is also should incorporate a pre-consultation process in which we solicit interests and availability of tribal governments to consult with us. And it's kind of not a new concept, but a new concept, right? Finding ways, again, to better accommodate tribes in how we do our consultation with them. When we're consulting on our policies, is a good way of doing business with tribes and being respectful in how we speak with them about the things that could affect them. And then accountability. So the plan has always included formal tribal leaders, included informing tribal leaders of our decisions. And we're being asked also to explain how tribal input was or was not incorporated. And it's a great idea. It's something that's done. And, there's a lot of federal agencies on this call. A lot of you all do that during your consultations. They're asking us, tribal leaders are asking us to be accountable for the decisions that we make and that we don't make if they're asking us to do things. So that's something that we will look into doing better. And I think that we'll end up coming up with a process that we use when we get, requests from the executive orders from the administration to do different types of consultation, and then how we do it. So I am confident in our staff. I'm confident in all of you that these ideas, that we can find ways to incorporate all these ideas into the plan, with the exception of reaching agreement or consent, unless the administration changes its position. So we have until April 26th to submit our plan. We can always update it and revise it again without being required to do so. And our plan for consultation, it should be a bit of a living document, that gets a review. And is it working? Or are we hearing from tribes, a year from now that, hey, there's can you look at this again? And so we need to be fluid and able to do that. In addition to the comments about our plan, tribal leaders specifically requested the ACHP to support a government-wide training program to prepare federal agencies to consult with tribes. So, a government-wide training program, prepare federal agencies to consult with tribes. All of our agency folks that, are on the call today, you all do a heck of a job. It would be great if we could just make sure that our folks in our agencies who are interacting with tribes get some kind of a consistency in training and how to do that. Cultural competence is huge, and the more that we can build cultural competence into our federal employees who interact with tribes, the better we are as a government, and you all are as federal agencies. So y'all are doing a good job, but I think it's just one of those things, and how can we make it better? And tribal leaders identified that. It's great. Tribal leaders are asking us to support the establishment of a scoring system on how well each agency is consulting with tribes. So, maybe a tool in which to identify some agencies that are doing a heck of a good job, and some that, could do a little better. And sometimes that kind of stuff happens. And if we shed light on how it's being done, I think that, best we can shed light for those ones that need a little help and bring them up. So, tribal leaders are asking us to do that. They're asking us to draft or assist in drafting a government-wide consultation protocol. We heard that often, and is something that I think is a foundational protocol that it can be expanded. In the case of it's one thing or another, one agency or another, but that's something that, so for some consistency, and we heard that over and over, that there was a lot of inconsistencies in the way that they were being consulted with. And finally, there's a whole list of things to fix the Section 106 tribal consultation, and Valerie has all those memorized, and will at some point reach out to you all. We'll probably do it during one of our committees and talk about that and see how we can kind of incorporate those things into what we do. So I would, Mr. Vice Chairman, I request and propose that we direct staff to prepare a report on the tribal comments we received directly during our own consultation, as well as comments we heard from the interior consultations, because many of those were similar. We should discuss these comments and develop a plan for how the ACHP would address them. So hopefully, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, that's agreeable to you, and we can make that direction to staff today.
Yes, Reno.
And that's all I have. Open for questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Excellent report, Reno. Enjoyed working with you and with Valerie. I think it's fair to say that our agency has probably been an A++ when it comes to tribal issues, right? There we go. You said yes. I like that. And for not now, but for many years. So, and I definitely agree with you on that consultation. On that roadmap, it's a living document, like a master plan, right? It should be reviewed every so often and massaged and tweaked and adjusted as necessary. One of the things early on, speaking with Reed, was the thought of even trying to get some visits in person once the COVID situation, comes down quite a bit, because I think that's important, like introducing everybody today, right? Well, I'm hoping next time everybody will definitely be on time, because we already got an email from one person that wasn't on time saying, I wish I would have been there on time, so, and we get to know each other a little bit more, right? And that's what I think we need to do with the tribes and be an example with other agencies, right? Since we have that long-term experience. And so I would ask Reed if it's okay, that we follow Reno's recommendation. And then if that's okay, I would also like to open this up to any of our federal members here today, if there's any questions for Reno or for Reed on this issue.
Mr. Vice Chairman, this is Shasta.
See you.
Not a federal agency representative, but I'm gonna elbow my way to the front of the line regardless. And I was on the first call and I was able to be on a little bit of the second call. And I will say Reno did a great job with kind of a thankless task, because some of the comments from some of the tribal folks who called in was a little bit of dismay over having to do this as a listening call versus being a consultation. But there was also an understanding, at least with my colleagues in California, when we had a follow-up meeting a few weeks later, that we understand that it's not within the timeline, it's not possible to have those individual consultations with every single tribe. I want to note that as many good comments as we did get during those conversations, it was, I would say, maybe 15% of tribes total who were able to participate. So, and that's, that's a fairly good amount, but we need to, be aware that there may be other comments, other issues that may come up with the tribes who are unable to be a part of those two calls. And I agree with Reno that the ACHP really is the model for how things should be done as far as the Section 106 process. And but of course, that's because that's the council's mission. So there is still a lot of work to be done. I was very much in favor myself of the scoring process. And a little bit tongue in cheek, I put in the chat that we should call it Yelp for agencies, but that's a little bit, what we're talking about here. And it's not, I think that suggestion is not necessarily to shame anybody, but to just bring attention to things that could be done better. And then I'll just put in a plug, like I always do when we have this conversation, for developing some sort of a federal government-wide framework for consultation, so that we're not having to do this over again with each agency individually, which tribes just don't have time for that. So it's a good start, and a lot of work remains to be done, and I'm sure the ACHP and the staff are up for it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shasta. Anybody else? Any other comments?
Yeah, this is Mike Brennan from the VA. I welcome the idea of a kind of a feedback loop, because, we think we're doing a pretty good job in the VA broadly, beyond just, the 106 requirements. We have a plan. We've been implementing it for a decade, but I think the feedback would be helpful. Even if we're doing a good job, I think this could help us be even better. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Michael. Okay. Thanks again. Thank you very much again on the report, Reno. I'm going to go ahead and move over to the meat of our meeting, our Section 106 report to the President 2021 report. As you members know, the ACHP produced a spectacular report on the stewardship of federally owned properties, and well done. I mean, what a great report. In February, and now it's time for us to establish once and for all a work plan for implementing the recommendations of this report. The Federal Agencies Program Committee had a good discussion on this a month ago, and I'd like to turn it over now to Jay Voigt, as committee chairman, to continue these discussions today. So, Jay?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. As you know, the Section 3 report comes out of the Preserve America Executive Order 13387, which requires the report. And you may recall that at the Federal Agency Program Committee, meeting, we discussed prioritizing the findings and the recommendations contained in the report at that Zoom meeting last month. In your packet is a link to the material on the Preserve America report. Members have been provided with a draft work plan for implementing these recommendations of the Section 3 report to review. On the recommendations within each of the six findings have been ranked so that they are from first to last in priority order. So what I ask of the members today is to keep two things in mind when we go through this material. One, do you think that the sequencing within each finding makes sense? And two, what can you as a member of the council do to help the staff implement the findings and recommendations? So, one, does the order make sense? And two, how can I as an individual council member be part of it? So now I'm going to ask you, if you're online with your documents, to scroll down to page 9, the implementation plan. Or if you're working off a paper, which old dudes like myself do, it's the page that starts "In the Spirit of Stewardship, a report on Federal Historic Property Management 2021, in your meeting book. And I'm going to turn it over to Reed and Tom to provide us a discussion of the different findings, which you'll find after the initial implementation thing, the forms that exist on pages 10 through 17 to discuss our priorities. So Reed, would you please take that over?
Thank you, Jay. I appreciate that. And I'll be brief and turn to Tom fairly quickly, but I guess I wanted to just underscore a few things as you look at this plan and give us feedback on it. One is, I think, certainly following Jay's point that we not only need your input on the plan, but we also may, in many of these circumstances, need your collaboration and partnership in making some of these improvements. And let me just make one point. We certainly have an opportunity with the Section 3 report to convey a message very high within the administration about things like reduce the footprint and budget scoring rules. But again, those are issues that are affecting you as federal agencies directly. We're just reporting on them. So if we don't have you along with us when we approach OMB, for example, they're going to be talking to the messenger, but not necessarily the source of some of those issues. So again, I would just underscore that particularly, a handful of the property managing agencies, we would like you to think as you're looking at this plan, not only about whether it makes sense, but whether you're ready to go along with us. Let me also just acknowledge too, that like many other things now, that some of these things may be prioritized and undertaken better when we have a full-time chairman in place. I think certainly many of them we can pursue now, but there are some of these doors that might open even further when we have a full-time chairman in place. So keep that in mind as well. And I think it's, we've got plenty to do. We just need to sort of factor those things in when we talk about priorities. So with that, let me just have Tom sort of summarize what those key priorities are so that you can all have something a little bit to react to. Tom?
Sure. Well, the first priority deals with leasing historic federal buildings to non-federal partners promotes productive use and contributions to local economies. In the interest of time, I think we can combine this with the next discussion we're going to be having on the leveraging historic properties working group. So why don't we move on to finding number 2?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
In the use of digital tools to better inform real property management decisions, but further improvements are needed. And if you look in your materials, you'll see where those provisions have been ranked from 1, 2 to 3. And the question is, the first finding is ACHP should work with federal agencies to implement recommendations in the ACHP's Digital Information Task Force Action Plan. So, the question to y'all would be, is that something that your agency, it's feasible to start working with us, working with the Park Service and others? And is it something that your agency is currently doing, digitizing historic property records? Some agencies are quite advanced, other agencies are getting going. So where do you see those priorities with dealing with digitization of historic preservation, historic property materials?
And Tom, maybe we just want to sort of cover them and then open up discussion on all of them. You want to do that?
Yes.
For all 6 of them? Okay. So finding number 3. Well, the primary benefit of partnerships is to leverage limited federal resources and assist federal agencies. Partnerships also contribute important community and educational benefits, including those that enable job training. And we have the preservation trades, traditional trades initiatives here as well. The 4th finding is agencies have effectively used 106 program alternatives to tailor 106 project reviews and have improved efficiency and effectiveness of project reviews for infrastructure projects affecting historic properties, especially on federal lands. So as you all know, we're putting together a group looking at program comments, their effectiveness. Should we continue to promote them like we have been, or should we steer other agencies towards other kind of program alternatives? The 5th finding is agencies should ensure timely involvement and active collaboration with Indian tribes and Native Hawaiian organizations. And this is one that traditionally has been one of the recommendations in the findings in each of our Section 3 reports. It was certainly in the last one, it was in the one before. So it's kind of a perennial issue. Agencies are making strides, as you'll see in our 2021 Section 3 report. What else can they do, to speed up, as Rena was talking about, their ability to consult effectively, early and often, with tribes and with NHOs? Is a scorecard something that we should help agencies, grade themselves or others grade them, and we help them work better within the Section 106 process? And finally, the 6th finding is, as more properties associated with the role of the federal government in advancing science and technology in the 20th century become eligible for the National Register, they present unique management challenges for various federal agencies, like NASA, like National Science Foundation, like Department of Energy. So those are the 6 findings in the 2021 report. And as Jay mentioned, each one of those findings has a series of recommendations that we've ranked. So our question to you is, do the rankings make sense? And what can you help us do on certain rankings, on certain findings or recommendations that your agency is working on?
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Do we have any agency members that would like to address Tom's comments? Everybody's a little quiet. Okay, maybe I can start this one then, because I've been itching to talk about this one. So, we can only go as far as our members amplify what we're doing. Our brand is about historic preservation places in America, right? So the more that you can help us at the federal level, the more that brand can continue to make impact in all the historic places across America, right? I think we have to have a line of the impact, and it only happens, improve with the help of the members. There's nothing worse than to have an empty historic building, a federal one, in deterioration in one of our cities, falling apart and sucking the life out of that neighborhood, versus putting that building, leveraging that building, the mighty muscle of the federal government, and putting that building to reuse, whether it's a small post office. For example, we just did a small post office in downtown Fort Pierce, Florida, or whether it's a very large Veterans Administration building that we showcased out west recently, that has become a wonderful place, Robert, for the Michael, for the veterans out west, and it's spectacular with the amount of buildings that that we use. That has intrinsic value. It's an amazing value when you take a drive in Baltimore where my daughter used to study, or Detroit or another city, and you see all of a sudden an abandoned school being repurposed for whatever, for apartments or whatever, right? You're making change. That little tiny post office in Fort Lauderdale has now created urban redevelopment on the west side of their downtown, and it's bringing other buildings. In fact, I forgot to tell this to you, Reed, the other days when we talked about this. The Obama government administration built a huge federal courthouse on that same street on the west side of town. It did nothing, did absolutely nothing. We had the grand opening of this new post office is now an event center. We had 400 people wearing masks and so over 4 hours. So it wasn't all at the same time. Last Thursday night in the west part of town, it was great to see that activity, right? And people looking at other buildings down the street, you know, so that latent value, that energy, that federal buildings, historic buildings, if we can put them back to use, the rankings that Tom has come up with in the committee, you know, as an architect, having digital material is so important for us. It saves so much time to have a working anything. And nowadays, right, because we've been limited to travel, right? You go to Google Maps and there's only so much you can, you know, a couple of pictures and the footprint, you know, but to have digital comments, document, that's so important. The traditional trades, you know, such an important thing. A couple of the projects that I've done recently, historic-wise, contractors are actually training young people to work, and the young people are loving it. This is great work that we do. You know, this is like really feel good work that we do, right? Anybody have anything against historic preservation? It doesn't matter where you're from, right? Even if you're from Mars, you know, it's good. It's good stuff, right? So you know, we got to get this. How do we capture this latent energy? How do we get these federal buildings repurposed out in the marketplace and make some good noise? Last case study, very recently, about a year and a half ago, the federal government put the incredible historic Art Deco Miami courthouse in downtown Miami. 20 years ago, Miami-Dade College, the local community college, built a campus in downtown Miami. Guess what? They won the project to turn that amazing post office into apartments and learning center for the students. What a win-win, right? I mean, new architecture, new downtown city like Miami, an amazing WPA 1930s federal courthouse being put to reuse, right? I mean, we have to have not one story, we have to have 1,000 stories like that. And we have to do that all working, I think, together, all the agencies with Reed and Tom and the rest of our team. I would just hope that we could do that. The process of ITNs, some of you probably have heard of it, invitations to negotiate, or even better, the PPP, which is private-public partnerships, have taken off in Florida over the last 10 years at the state, county, and local level. So I encourage those methodologies to the federal government, because those are great ways of getting these empty buildings that are doing nothing in our historic towns and putting them back to use as quickly as possible. And address so many other issues, right? Because we are cross-pollinators in historic preservation, right? We deal with climate change, we deal with urban renewal, we deal with architecture design, you know, feeding the homeless, you know, putting people into with a roof over their head. There's many things that we can do with these projects, from veterans to you know, to students, you know. So I'm sorry if I took a little bit of time there, Reed, but I've been wanting to talk about this issue for a while. So thank you, Tom. Thank you very much.
So Rick, I think that's an excellent, thank you. That was terrific. Definitely agree with everything you said. As I look at the implementation plan here, it occurs to me that another thing, and listening to you particularly, that we need is a marketing plan. And I really think that that's something that we need to look at very seriously if we want to succeed in this area. And I think there are a number of partners that can play a role that we haven't even thought about. I'm thinking, for example, of the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions. Corey is on. Corey, I think, I know what's happening in Fairfax County with something called the Resident Curator Program. There are programs like this, and we'll talk more about it in the next section. We talk about leveraging historic buildings, federal buildings. But I really think that the marketing plan is key to being successful here, and something that we need to look at.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jordan. And we're not marketing coal, right? We're marketing historic preservation, which should be, I don't know, easy to sell, I think, right? I mean,
I agree.
Okay, I lost my spot here on our agenda. Let me see what we have next.
Rick, I see Kevin Bush has got his hand up.
Yes, Kevin, go ahead, please.
Yeah.
Thanks. So on the, on the prioritized list of actions, which I believe is what we're talking about, implementation plan, I note that there is, as a secondary priority listed, coordinating with HUD on affordable housing for leveraging historic properties. And I wanted to know if maybe I could hear a little bit more about that. And why I'm asking is there's, HUD doesn't actually develop any affordable housing itself. We fund a lot of it. So I wanted to make sure that that distinction was understood in whatever is underneath that statement.
Sure. I think we understand that and recognize that HUD has a unique role regarding affordable housing. I think part of what inspires us to coordinate further with HUD is the recognition that, and this sort of came about in a recent policy statement or report developed by HUD, that sometimes historic preservation is seen as an impediment to affordable housing. And I think, frankly, if we can continue the good work we've done with HUD to not only sort of, dispute that notion, but actually demonstrate that historic preservation in reusing, very well-built historic buildings that can be rehabilitated with fewer problems than developers often anticipate is a way of sort of enhancing the use of these sorts of buildings. Obviously, they're not federally owned. This sort of stretches the margins of what the Section 3 report covers. But I think nonetheless, HUD has certainly a big influence on the use or the lack thereof of those sorts of buildings. So I think there's a lot of work for us to do. And we've made strides in the past. So
I'd like to add to that a little bit, Kevin. I do work on a lot of historic work, but I also do a lot of affordable housing. And the development clients in Florida, they all love HUD money, right? Everybody wants to get the points. They fight for the points. When they lose, they go back and they fight again, and the projects get in suspense. I'm amazed by the system. So even something as simple as, we're going to give 5 extra points if you bring in a historic building to create affordable housing. I mean, little things that we can think out of the box like that, so that developers don't show up at the table asking for a raw piece of land to build inexpensive buildings, but instead, like Reed said, look at historic buildings, find a good plan and implement it as part, and use, again, it's cross-pollination, it's win-win. We take care of HUD housing, we take care of historic buildings just by giving a few more points to reusing. And by the way, we get it done sooner because, again, that abandoned building is standing right there. You don't need to go through hell planning and zoning, from scratch on a raw piece of land, which takes a year or two sometimes, right? You can get working on it right away. So I think that would help a lot too. If we can get agencies to say, all right, from now on, we want to try to see a way to accelerate the reuse of historic buildings.
Well, and I think the program you're referring to actually sounds like the Treasury's low-income housing tax credit program.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's Treasury managed by state housing finance agencies, which create the point system you're talking about. I think on our end, I just wanted to make sure you knew that distinction. I think if it's about promoting and highlighting where our grantees, which are either state and local government spending block grants or private developers, accessing FHA insured mortgages, where we can work together to promote good examples. Yes. I think that's great. But I wanted, it was a broad statement, so I wanted to make sure I understood what was underneath it.
Thank you, Kevin. I've got 4 hands up. I'll start first with Teresa. Doctor.
So unmuting myself. One of the things that would really help stimulate federal agencies and get their attention is maybe talking to OMB about budget criteria, and certainly regarding sustainability. The reuse of historic facilities is definitely a motivator. But I mean, you know, with the emphasis on sustainability, climate change, in the new administration, you know, perhaps OMB would be open to, you know, putting criteria, maybe a circular on, you know, historic use of historic properties, that kind of thing. I don't know, Reed probably has a lot more information about that than I do, but I mean, I just think that it's prime time, you know?
Yes. We're up to bat, and I'm sure everybody's heard the greenest building is a historic building, right? I think that's something that they drilled in our head even back in college, right? So let's grab that one and run with it. We got the football now, so let's take advantage. Michael, you're next.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. I was really pleased to hear you use an example of our Leavenworth enhanced use lease project. You know, we've worked hard and the team's really committed to this. And I just want to share it. This one's unique. You know, we just opened up in Milwaukee another enhanced use lease, a facility built in 1869 to house Civil War veterans on the campus of Milwaukee Medical Center. Well, today, once again, our veterans are now living in that facility, serving as the Milwaukee Veterans Home. So, I mean, there's some very deep symbolic meaning, and we talk about marketing, even with our mission. This is some important stuff, and I just wanted to tout that example on top of the one you mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And I'll add a quick note to that too. The developer that did Michael's project, and by the way, I think 80% of everything that's built today is by developers, was so hooked on historic. Once you do historic, you don't go back, right? That, right, Michael? He's like, he was talking, we had a Zoom meeting. He was just talking about, I'm gonna do this other historic project and this one and this one. And I think it's all from that nice big job he did for you, Michael, that you got him hooked on historic. And so that's another opportunity there for us, you know? Thank you, Michael. Next I have Ramona and then John after that.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm very excited about this topic as well. I can't tell you how many times constituents have come to our office here in North Carolina. I've heard this from our colleagues in other states. I know federally owned building X. I'd love to do something with that. Who do I contact? How do I do that? And this is sort of a chicken and egg dilemma, if you will, and opportunity at the same time. And I really appreciate Jordan's comments about marketing, but it's the chicken and the egg portion of it is we have to have the structure to allow the out leases and to have some consistency and a protocol, et cetera. But I also think to continue the momentum with this, we need to have the federal agencies identify those properties that are either underutilized, abandoned, don't know about, but the community knows about, and perhaps work with the SHPOs to help do that, because we hear things anecdotally from our shared constituents that could be helpful. So to that end, on the list of recommendations, there's one that has a priority 2. I think that should be bumped up to priority 1. And that's the one for GSA and the Federal Real Estate or Real Property Council to work on how they centralize their data to figure out which data or which property can be available or should be available for non-federal use. So it's that chicken and the egg. I think we can work on those two things simultaneously.
Yes.
Because there's a clamor out there, and I think that it should be addressed. So thank you.
Thank you, Ramona. We can learn from state, county, and city government too. The unsolicited proposal methodology in Florida is unbelievable. Basically, you find a project or a site, you like it, you put a proposal together, your developer, your architect, your finance, you submit it. They have 30 days in Florida to react to it, to put it on the street. Nobody else bids on it. It's yours, move forward, get it done, you know? So we need to do some of these things a little quicker than we're used to doing them. John, I have you next on the questions.
Yes, thanks. So, you know, one of the sort of boring blocking and tackling is when you have, you know, really cool building, somebody's interested in it, you know, actually getting all the leasing done and all that kind of work is difficult. And we talked about this another time, Reed, like at each agency to have all that expertise to do it. And we talked about, you know, maybe there should be a center of excellence that really can work at it for each. I didn't see the center of excellence in a specific recommendation. Reed, you told me, you know, maybe it was a little premature to get into that and it was a little late in the game or whatever. But I just think it's going to be very difficult to, like, NASA's got their expert on leasing and this agency, the buildings come up sort of ipsy dixit. They're not consistently that you're like a real estate developer always dealing with it. And therefore to have that center of excellence, that is the sinew between all the organizations would be really useful, and I think very much facilitate, because I could see these things just kind of withering on the vine because of that execution problem, logistics.
Very good, John. Very good. And like a best practices too, right? Where
yeah, and that's what, so maybe Reed, you want to hit that, because I know you've been you're it's not like you're fighting the idea.
Right. No, in fact, I can tell you the very good news is that that is one of the priorities in the next report we're about to talk about, the leveraging report. So absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more, and we'll get there in a few moments.
Okay, I got two quick questions, last two questions, and then we'll move on to the work plan. Christopher King, and then Dr. Teresa, last on this subject.
Great. I just quickly, I think John's point is an excellent one, and not to circle too far back, but I think on the marketing, it sort of ties in with all of this. You know, two of our big challenges at a local level for historic districts in general, but one we're feeling acutely in Charleston is the pressure of sustainability, climate action, but also housing affordability. And I think any opportunity to highlight the synergy, it's a tremendous opportunity. As I looked through that report and looked at the success stories, I mean, they are compelling. And I think the more that we can incorporate those ideas into this process, I think it has much larger benefits.
Bigger outreach. Thank you, Christopher. And Dr. Teresa.
Just a word, about the pandemic. The pandemic is making a lot of federal agencies reevaluate how much space they really need, because we've been able to operate in a largely telework environment. So talking about reusing historic facilities that federal agencies may, in the future declare excess and surplus because, they really don't need them anymore because of space allocation decisions that they're being made, and redesigning the workplace of the future, that kind of thing. It might be the time is ripe. Reed, I think you and I have had these discussions before. It might be that the time is right for the ACHP to come out with some kind of a policy declaration, something like that. Just a suggestion.
Great point. Thank you, Teresa. Okay, I'm going to go ahead now and turn it over to Jay Voigt to introduce the work plan that we're developing to implement this report's recommendations. So Jay, are you there?
I'm here.
There you are. Okay.
Again, I'm gonna, the work plan for the findings, you gotta remember we have 6 findings we're dealing with here. And I don't know if we wanna go over the work plan point by point, if Bede and Tom wanna do that. I don't know what our timeline is. We've kind of been dancing back and forth with leveraging historic properties. So how do you want to proceed there?
Well, Mr. Committee Chairman and Mr. Vice Chairman, I think we've already gotten some interesting and very helpful advice about the specific work plan. Tom summarized for you sort of the key findings, but I think we sort of got into the work plan when we started talking about prioritizing for example, looking at a center for excellence, et cetera. I think we're in good shape. And Mr. Vice Chairman, what I might suggest is perhaps we dive into the leveraging report now, which really allows us to address a number of the really great points that came up here.
Yes, let's go ahead and do that. We've got about 10 minutes available on this section still, so let's go ahead and do that.
Okay.
Okay, I'll just follow up with that. As I said, we've been kind of dancing back and forth a little bit with federal agency stewardship of their historic properties, but now we're talking about how we can leverage those buildings. And I have not been directly involved in this particular work group, but it was put together by former Chairman Amy Giorgiani about a year ago, and it consisted of both federal and non-federal members, all from which came from the Advisory Council. It was established because of the Advisory Council's 2018 Section 3 report. So we're still tying all of these things together, and they recommended convening such a group. Well, now we are looking at the next Section 3 report, and we just are trying to get all of this put together. And that's why we see a little dance between the work plan in terms of the stewardship of all these buildings and actually leveraging their work. On the legal authorization for outleasing of historic properties is available to property managing federal agencies under Section 111 of the National Historic Preservation Act and other agency-specific authorities. But we also know many agencies have been using their own provisions and at times have had difficulty dealing with the Section 11 authorities. The group was charged, the Leveraging Federal Historic Buildings group was charged with helping the advisory council assess the status of outleasing and develop recommendations for overcoming these obstacles to outleasing to advance utilization of our nation's historic federal buildings. To fulfill its charge, and earlier this month published its final report, which includes findings and recommendations, best practices, outleasing success stories, and a list of legal authorities for outleasing. And I want to say congratulations to the working group and the staff for all they were done. There's a link to the report in your meeting book. And if you haven't looked at the report, I encourage you to do so. Now, I'm again going to turn this over to Reed and ask him to talk about the report's distribution and its next steps. The staff will go through the details. He or his staff will walk us through the action plan and ask for our members' input on the priorities, as well as commitments from members again to assist in addressing these actions. So Reed.
Thank you, Jay, and I appreciate those kind words. I couldn't be happier with the report and the concerted effort that the working group made with us over the last year and a half or so under former Chairman Giorgiani's leadership to really sit down and burrow into this issue. Obviously, when we were talking about the Section 3 report, the challenges that agencies and sort of the up and down successes that agencies are having in outleasing historic buildings under their ownership or control have been clear to us, frankly, since the very beginning of the Section 3 reporting process, all the way back in 2006. We've heard from agencies time and time again, every 3 years, that they've had challenges, that they've had successes, but they've also had challenges. So the development, the establishment of this work group was really to sort of burrow down further into what those challenges were and to start to come up with some solutions. And I'm pleased to say, I think the working group under Chairman Giorgiani's leadership really did come up with some interesting ideas. Let me also just acknowledge that many of the working group members are here on the screen today. Thank you very much for your efforts in supporting this. We must have had 6, 7, 8 meetings over the last year, so I know it took some effort. Let me also just call out quickly Angela McCardle and Kirsten Koulis of our staff, who were the primary authors on this report. They just did a magnificent job in taking the advice of the working group and putting it into a report. It's a beautiful report. And let me also thank the communications, education, and outreach folks too, who demonstrated to us that we can in fact develop 2 beautiful reports in one season. So thank you. I just wanted to also acknowledge that there are obviously 2 sides to this equation. These are federal buildings, but we're talking about outleasing them to the private sector. And I think somebody said it a moment ago, folks from the private sector, industry, developers, et cetera, they have told us time and time again, it's not always easy to sort of peer into the federal outleasing system. Different agencies do it differently. They use different authorities. It's not clear to them necessarily where to go to find out what buildings are available for outleases. And then when they do find that, the processes with each agency tend to be different. And the positions that agencies take on things like Section 111 are different as well. So I think one of the things we heard loud and clear from the developer side was that the federal government could become more consistent and more transparent in how it markets its buildings that are subject to outlease. So I appreciate the comments today. Taking that into account, one of the things we were sure to do in distributing this report was not only to make sure that the preservation community had it, but also industry, developers, the private sector as well. So we've taken some effort to get it out to them. Thank you to the work group for advising on how we can do that. I also wanted to thank you, Vice Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, for when we released the report. We were also able to post a Zoom interview that you did, highlighting a successful VA outlease at a National Historic Landmark in Leavenworth, Kansas. Thank you, VA, as well. Both the VA and the Vice Chairman did a great job in sort of demonstrating one very successful outlease. So we were very pleased to be able to do that. With that, let me turn to Angela McCardle, who will give a very brief sort of overview of the more specific findings here, and then just talk about our priorities so we can get your input on that. Angela, go ahead.
Sure. So good afternoon, everyone. We've had this report out on the street for about a week now. And in this first week, we've reached close to 2,000 people on both Facebook and LinkedIn, those social media platforms. And the interview that Reed mentioned has been viewed so far on YouTube about 80 times. So we're starting to roll out in this first week. And our distribution to industry folks that we don't normally correspond with has included about 50 groups so far. And those have been in the sectors of hospitality and small business, restaurant, retail, affordable housing, and property management. And we welcome any input on any other sectors or any specific groups that you guys think that we should be making sure get this report in their hands. We've also our leveraging webpage to post both the report in its entirety, as well as the success stories that are interspersed throughout the report as standalone downloadable handouts so that they can be easily shareable if you need to do that. So to recap, the report had 3 overarching recommendations, and those are foster interagency coordination and administrative efficiencies, to expand marketing and education, and incentivize outleasing policies. And then within each of those 3, we had a series of action items that the working group developed. And we plan to implement these action items in cooperation with both our federal and non-federal preservation partners over the coming months. Before that, though, we are seeking input from you all to determine the priorities for these action items, similarly as to the request for the Section 3 report. And ACHP staff provided you with a draft list of these priorities. If you've got the meeting book up, it's on pages 18 and 19. But just to quickly summarize our top priorities, which have been already discussed a little bit when we were getting into Section 3, are coordinating with the Office of Management and Budget to determine the potential for revisions to reduce the footprint, which is now commonly referred to as the strategy, and look at their revision schedule and how ACHP can engage with them to better account for the benefits of outleasing and promote that in those revisions. We also think it's a top priority to reach out to Nick Schippo to start exploring how state historic preservation offices handle the Section 106 and outleasing historic tax credit reviews to see where there might be an opportunity to streamline and avoid duplicative reviews for those processes. Another top priority is to start discussions with GSA on how their outleasing program and GSA's Office of Real Property Utilization and Disposal could provide expertise and resources to other agencies. And this is where we were recommending the establishment of a center of excellence that several folks have talked about today. We also want to start discussions with GSA's Office of Government-Wide Policy, which is the group that supports the federal real property profile, on improving the accessibility and the centralization of information for federal agencies. So those are our top ones going forward. We have some secondary ones about coordinating with HUD to promote using historic properties and affordable housing, and looking at updating our 2006 affordable housing policy statement, promoting the combined use of tax credits, improving accessibility of information for the prospective lessees and the partners, and then pursuing the issuance of an executive order that would encourage outleasing. In the background of all of that, kind of ongoing, we also would like to prioritize the incorporation of outleasing recommendations that are in the report into our training, and encourage other federal agency partners to do the same, and participate in thematically relevant conferences and panel discussions. And we have a fall 2021 National Trust Conference proposal pending already. But again, we welcome any other recommendations on where we might try and incorporate some of these findings. So we'd like your input on this prioritization that we've provided on pages 18 and 19. And with that, the floor is open for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Angela. Let me see, Jordan?
Yeah, so Angela, first let me compliment you and VA on the establishment of a national VA museum in Dayton, Ohio, and the reuse of the headquarters building for that purpose. Great job. I do think, as I mentioned before, it would be useful, and Corey, you might, not to put you on the spot, but I guess I am, you might want to comment, but I think along with NICSPO, the NAPC, the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions, could be another group that you'd want to include in your consultations. As I said, I'm a member of the Fairfax County History Commission, and this program and the resident curator program, they're long-term leases of county properties where the tenants rehabilitate and maintain those properties. I think you'll get some other good advice and counsel and ideas from doing that. So just to underscore that.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you very much. Any other comments? Angela, before we move on, the social media items, maybe you can share it with those of us here so that we can post on our social medias and spread like wildfire all the good stuff that's happening here. Thanks again.
Sure.
Okay, I think I'm ready, Reed, to move on to our next item. We have a program comment review panel, right? And Jay, there's Jay again. So Jay.
Okay, former chairman Amy Georgiani established the panel to review and consider recommendations for improving the program comments development process. Now, you may recall that program comments is one of 5 different program alternatives that agencies can use to improve Section 106 efficiencies through this program alternative. Amy was heading the program when she resigned from the council, and I've been asked to take the lead on it now, which the other members include Reno Franklin and Tony Costa, representing Veterans Affairs, and I don't think Tony's on the call today. We have now been joined by the Vice Chairman, Rick Gonzalez, to keep us in order. The panel reached out to you as Advisory Council members in February with questions about your experiences in working with developing program comments. And that information has really formed the basis for our recent discussions. And I thank everyone who made some contribution to those questions. During our most recent meeting at the end of March, we considered how program comment development process ideally should proceed in light of our member feedback. There appears to be 3 main areas where the Advisory Council could provide additional clarity or consider procedural improvements. 1, be more specific, provide more specific guidance about best practices for the development process leading up to the agency's formal request. This is all preparatory work. Through the Advisory Council, we can only make recommendations to agencies about how to develop their proposals. Guidance could help agencies, and so the Advisory Council staff and membership and stakeholders can establish shared expectations at the start of the process. So we're all starting kind of at the same spot, or where we want to have an idea of where we want to end up at. 2, clear feedback to the agencies about where the Advisory Council has outstanding concerns in their proposal while they're developing their draft, such as whether stakeholders' concerns are reasonably addressed. Should they also be keeping members informed about agency progress at regular intervals? There's a lot going on in that particular one in terms of meeting expectations, development of the draft, dealing with stakeholder, whether their ideas and thoughts are being well taken into consideration, and then how the council should be more involved in it. 3, offering an opportunity to the council members to provide comments on the draft program comments before the agency formally submits the request and begins the 45-day process. I think this is going to be a key one. Agencies deserve a chance to learn about member concerns at a point where the drafts can more easily be adjusted and changed and revised or responded to. Member input should be also timely to help the agency make formal requests that is in nearly the final form when we get it at the 45-day period. This also then puts the impetus on the council members to actually respond when we see a draft response, and not wait until the 11th hour in which to be concerned about different items. The panel members would like to hear from all the advisory council members now about whether these preliminary findings could improve program comment development process for both federal agencies and the stakeholders. What specific elements of new or expanded guidance should be most helpful? I mean, what do agencies need to know? What do you want agencies to know? How do members prefer to receive this information about program comments in development? What sort of regular reporting process would work best for you so that you have a chance to actually comment on the proposal, the draft proposal, and have a meaningful response to it? And what kind of assessment of information would about how an agency has developed the consultation best practices during the development process should be provided to members when they are asked to vote? I mean, what do members want to see when they get what we would consider the final program comments? What do they want to see from the staff, and what do they want to receive in terms of their packet? So at this time, I want to open it up to members to comment on. The last program comment we dealt with, we turned back. There were a lot of, and then the one before that, there was a lot of controversy about it. So I think this is what prompted us to really look at program comments and figure out a better way to have them developed and get a chance for the advisory council members to comment earlier in the process as opposed to waiting for the 45-day period. So I'm going to open it up for people, and I'll let Rick chair this portion of it so that we can get some comments here.
Thank you, Jay. I really enjoyed participating and learning about this complex process. So I'm all aboard this getting early input on things always, right, before you go too far down the road. So let's see. I see Ramona has her hand up. So Ramona.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Jay, for all the work of our colleagues as well on this issue. And I apologize because I'm kind of coming late to the party, having just assumed this role. But we have had experience in my state with program comments as well as the other members of NICSHPO. A question I have is, was there further discussion about adapting the advisory council's rules to reflect some of these recommendations, such, for example, the 45-day clock? This is all sort of, it's not, the rules as they are now, someone could come to us without this sort of best practice recommendation, and there we are. So has there been further discussion about changing the 45-day clock and extending that so that there would be the opportunity and the requirement as well for these program comments to be developed more in tandem and in the spirit of consultation that our colleague Reno Franklin mentioned at the beginning of the call when it comes to tribes? I think that extends to all stakeholders here. So was there conversation about that? And I apologize, I'm late to the party here.
Well, Ramona, I think that's an excellent question. And I think we're trying to dodge changing the rules as best we can. The idea is to encourage federal agencies to have a very serious upfront conversation before they decide that's the route they want to go, because there's other routes that they can take. I think we have now examples of things that turn sideways when we don't have adequate conversations early on. And one of the emphasis has been is we really do need to have meaningful consultation between the SHPOs, the THPOs, and the tribal governments in making sure that we're making the right decision. I think the key is encouraging federal agencies to, when they make their decision about what route they want to go, whether they want to go with, nation programmatic agreement as opposed to program comments. Program comments are the only ones that require a council to vote on. And so that's, if the council is concerned about certain things, federal agencies should know about that so that they may want to decide to go a different route. But a specific answer to your question, there isn't a lot of enthusiasm to change the regulations.
Reed, would you like to add to any of that?
Sure, I'll be brief because I think Jay said it well. You know, when environmental review regulations are opened up, there tends to be a lot of interest from a lot of folks about tinkering with them. And I think Jay is right. I think our pretty strong inclination is to avoid that for the reasons that he stated and others. I would just also acknowledge, Ramona, you mentioned the 45-day period. And you know, certainly that's an element of this that comes up often. I would contend that the 45-day review period feels insufficient only when an agency hasn't taken better advantage of the pre-development process before that 45-day period.
Right.
So in other
I
words, there
understand.
tend to be fewer problems in that 45-day, you know, regulatory review when an agency's really engaged both consulting parties and us and our members effectively ahead of time. Those couple circumstances where it felt like those 45-day periods weren't enough, I think, you know, they didn't use that pre-period as well as they could have.
I understand. I'm flagging this because I think it could be a concern, continue to be a concern in the future. And I appreciate everyone's work on looking at this so conscientiously.
Thank you. Thank you, Ramona. Any other comments from members or anyone else? Okay, before we move on, I do want to thank Blythe Summer for all her hard work on this committee, helping Jay and the committee. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you, Blythe.
All right, next, item 4D, the positive train control program comment amendment. And we're going to have Jamie Lockinger give us a summary of the recent requests that the ACHP received to amend the positive train control program comment that was issued way back in 2014. So Jamie?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. So as you rightfully noted, the ACHP issued the program comment to tailor the Federal Communication Commission's Section 106 review for undertakings involving the construction of positive control wayside poles infrastructure, also known as the Positive Train Control Program.
Oh, we're losing you.
Yep.
We lost her.
Oh, yeah.
That was
Jamie, maybe go off video. Maybe that might help your bandwidth.
PTC system by December 31st, 2015. That deadline was further extended until December 31st, 2020. So it just passed.
Jamie,
as a reminder,
we lost you.
Jamie, we lost you for most of that. Maybe you could go off video and repeat. Yeah.
Okay. We'll try again. So
there we go.
All right. The joys of living in Baltimore and having everybody working from home. But in any event, the program comment was issued following the enactment of the Rail Safety Improvement Act, which requires certain freight and passenger railroads to deploy the positive train control system by December 31st, 2015. That deadline was further extended to December 31st, 2020. As a reminder, that legislation requires the positive train control system implementation on rail lines that carry poisonous or toxic hazardous materials and meet a certain annual freight limit, as well as on any railroad's main lines that cross through intercity or commuter rail passenger trail service. So the positive train control itself is a complex system that includes wayside poles and their associated infrastructure. While the Federal Railroad Administration, or FRA, is responsible for implementing the PTC transmission facilities, the FCC licensed the radio spectrum that PTC uses. So it also has an undertaking. The current program comment provides the FCC with an alternative way to fulfill its responsibilities under 106, but it also relieves other federal agencies like the FRA from the need to conduct separate Section 106 reviews regarding the effects of PTC's construction. FRA has confirmed that all railroads that were subject to the statutory mandate met that December 31st, 2020 deadline. However, it does anticipate that additional railroads, such as commuter lines, will become subject to the statutory mandate in the future. Also, over time, additional rail lines will become subject to the mandate due to the increase in rail traffic and the volume of certain hazardous materials they carry. FRA also anticipates that several railroads will voluntarily elect to implement the positive train control system. To utilize the program comments efficiencies for these rail lines, FRA has requested an amendment to extend the program comment. The amendment stipulation within the program comment allows the chairman to approve such an amendment following coordination with the FCC and providing written notice about the proposed amendment to the FCC, FRA, NIC SHPO, NAFPO, and several rail industry organizations. That notification went out on April 8th, and the comment period for those agencies and organizations ends on April 23rd. Before the vice chairman makes a decision regarding the amendment, it would be helpful for him and for staff to hear from the membership regarding any concerns with extending the program comments duration. So with that, I will turn it back over to the vice chairman and to the membership.
Thank you, Jamie. And I would like to see, are there any questions from our members or guests? Let me see. Don't see any hands raised in yellow. Appreciate your report, Jamie, and we'll continue to work on it. I appreciate it very much. All right, item number 5, historic preservation policy and programs. Here we are back with the Save Oak Flat Act. Members, as you know, we issued comments also to the Secretary of Agriculture on Resolution Copper just a few weeks ago. One of the first things I had to get involved with Reed here, a fun one too, by the way. And one of our key recommendations to the Secretary was to work with Congress to please seek legislation that would get rid of this mess, right? Make it go away. You know, it's interesting. It's not a Democrat or Republican item. It is a multi-decade item. So the sooner we get rid of it, I think the better. Our letter did not, though, reflect the Save Oak Flat Act, since it has only been out in the House at that point. And so we, as the ACHP members, need to give appropriate consideration to this specific bill before we endorse it, right, to get to the bottom of it. Now that it's been introduced to the Senate, while still early in the legislative process, it's time for us to begin the discussion today about taking a position of it on it. So I hope you've had time, to look at it. We want to assure the federal members in particular today that I'm not aiming for a vote on our potential support today. It's too early. But I do want to take, this opportunity, this big meeting that we have going on right now, to discuss it and get your input to give us some direction. And I would like to also thank Drew, who's been phenomenal working with, and to lead us also in the discussions about the merits of this item, so that we can then consider, when and how and we might support or not support it, or at least even portions of it. So Drew, I would love for you to take over.
Okay, thanks, Rick.
There you are.
As you may have seen if you took a look at the bill, or in perusing the meeting paper on it, it basically is in 2 sections. One portion of it would indeed repeal the legislative requirement that was in the National Defense Authorization Act from 2015 to do the land exchange. So it would do away with the land exchange, and the transfer of the property from the Forest Service to Resolution Copper would not occur. It also would withdraw oak flat from future disposal. It would say it could not be disposed of in the future, and it would also say it could not be used for mining or geothermal leasing. That's the action part of the bill. And then there is a rather lengthy section of the bill that is a series of findings. These findings talk about a number of things. They talk about the scope of the mining operation, the impacts to Oak Flat, the process, the legislative process that was gone through, alleging a lack of a proper legislative process for having it added to the National Defense Authorization Act. Talks about basically all variety of aspects of federal policy on Indian lands and Indian cultural sites. And basically characterizes it as a negative precedent to be essentially giving federal land containing a sacred site to a corporation for this kind of use. So we have to consider, one thing I think you all need to consider in looking at this bill and how or if the ACHP would support it, is that some of these findings are not necessarily congruent with some of our comments. I see that Reno has just asked about the name of the bill. It is the Save Oak Flat Act. It's House Bill 1885 and Senate Bill 915, I believe, is the Senate version. But back to what I was saying about the findings. Some of these findings are not necessarily totally jive with our comments to agriculture in the Section 106 process. For instance, there's a finding that environmental reviews were circumvented. Well, the very fact that the Section 106 process went forward, we commented, and once the Secretary of Agriculture responds to those comments, means the Section 106 process did go forward. It was not circumvented, it occurred. You might not like the outcome, but it did happen. So that's a disconnect. And then there's some other findings that you would have to have knowledge of circumstances that the ACHP simply does not have in order to fully support that finding. For instance, the finding about that the regular order of legislative order in terms of transparency and process was not adhered to. We were not party to that. We don't really have all the details on that. We can't really speak to that knowledgeably. So because of this, one thing that we would want to kind of lay out on the table that you might want to consider is whether the ACHP was interested in essentially signaling support for portions of this bill, the action portion, presumably, and remain silent or say it was not going to take a position on other parts of the bill. That would be one way to approach it that would be consistent with the comments that we've done through Section 106. Now, as to the timeline here, it's not totally clear how this bill is going to move forward or if it will move forward in Congress. However, one signal that the momentum that has come out of the Forest Service pulling back the final environmental impact statement on this project is there was a hearing held 2 days ago by the House Subcommittee for Indigenous Peoples of the United States, in which they basically looked at this bill. The subcommittee members present and a few committee members, it kind of came out almost like a split, almost a 50-50 kind of split in how they were signaling whether they were for or against the bill. So there is some congressional movement. Of course, if agriculture were to reissue a final environmental impact statement, when and if they do, that obviously might jumpstart the legislation. So we can't really give you much of a sense of what would be the optimal timing for the ACHP to take a position on the bill if it decides that it wants to. And it's clearly, as Rick said, premature to be taking any kind of vote or anything right now. But we thought that it would be, obviously, if things start moving and the ACHP wants to take a position, that could be done at either through an unassembled meeting, which a number of you are familiar with the notion of voting while there is not an assembled group, actual business meeting, or at a later business meeting if the timing coincided to make that work. So bottom line, we're throwing this open basically to get your views, your sense, how you might see the issues here, and particularly the notion of whether you all might want to consider some aspect of looking at supporting maybe part of the Save Oak Flat Act and remaining silent on other parts of it. So I throw it open, and I'll obviously be happy to answer any questions as well.
Thank you so much, Drew. Do I see any raised hands right now? Oh, yes. Shasta, please.
Thanks, Drew. And I have a couple of questions. The first one is that I see that this bill has been introduced and reintroduced a couple of times at least. And I'm curious if ACHP has ever taken a position on any of the proposed bills.
No, we have not previously taken a position on it. And you're right, ever since like within a few months of this Section 3003 being put in the NDAA, a bill was introduced. It's very similar, but slightly different than this one. We have never in the past taken a position on it.
And my second broader question, and I should probably know this, but I'm happy to admit that I'm stupid sometimes, does the ACHP usually take positions on proposed legislation?
Yes, I mean, not all the time or not in great numbers, but yes, we certainly in the past. usually not so site specific. But in this particular case, this has been such a controversial Section 106 case, and our comments, our Section 106 comments actually talk about the answer the best answer for preserving these historic resources to not have this project happen sort of puts us in a unique situation of it would be logical to take a position on a site-specific bill like this.
Okay.
Shasta, if I can add to that too, the size of this project and the 5 decades of impact of this project and the sacred value of this site to the, to all the people of Indian background, it was just too big not to, be specific with. We had to do this.
Oh, trust me, I am 150 bazillion% behind stopping this project by any means necessary. Not only as the NAFPO chair, but as a human being. So, which implies that people who support it are not human beings, and I'm okay with that. But in any case, I want to see the ACHP support this. I appreciate, Drew, you pointing out that there are some inconsistencies. I would hope that whatever formal statement the ACHP would make would be, as you said, specific to the things that we can support, and maybe even pointing out, some of the inconsistency. I don't know if that's something that we would want to do, but if this is in keeping with the statements that the ACHP has already made about this project. So to me, there's really no discussion necessary. I think it's obvious what we should do, which I realize I'm setting people up to fight with me. Come at me, bro. I'm ready for you.
I've got several hands up, so let's start with Paul Edmondson. Paul?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I guess what I'd like to do is just simply associate my comments with the comments of the Vice Chairman at the outset of this meeting and just a few minutes ago. This project, the plug needs to be pulled on this project. It is simply an inappropriate use of federal authority, taking away land that is sacred to a Native American, more than one Native American tribe, I believe, and should not be simply given into the hands of private mining interests that have shown themselves to be irresponsible with these issues in their past practices. So I think that while I haven't parsed through the findings, Drew, I certainly get your point, but the 106 process is not the only environmental process that relates to this. And in our view, the environmental processes have not been followed appropriately, particularly with respect to Native American consultation, which we've just talked about the standards for that. So at least from my perspective, our perspective as the National Trust, we think that the council, in its role, it's a very important role to advise the Congress on legislation, should take a position in support of this legislation. I think it can be done in a nuanced way that doesn't necessarily associate with every single aspect of the bill, but the purpose and the conclusion of the bill that takes away this authority. So, or this requirement is actually not simply an authority, but a requirement. So that would be our position, and I hope the council will take a strong stand on this.
Thank you, Paul. Next hand raised is Kat. Oh,
Mr.
I'm
Vice
sorry,
Chairman,
Reed. Yes, sorry, Reed. Yes.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just wanted to add something that relates to Paul's comments a moment ago. I just want to clarify, while this is technically a separate issue, I did want to acknowledge that we have taken care to ensure that all of the subcommittees, both in the House and the Senate, that are considering and potentially weighing in on this bill have received a copy of our letter. I also want to make sure that folks understand that both the authors of the Senate and House version have received a copy of our comment letter. And we also ensured that it was a part of the record of the subcommittee proceedings 2 days ago as well. I know that's a separate issue, but I wanted to make sure everybody knew that we had made sure that those were all received.
Reed, thank you very much, and we did note that, and I thank the council and the staff for making sure that the appropriate folks on the Hill got those comments. It was very helpful.
Basically said you support what they're doing.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Reed. I'm going to go next to again, Kat Slick.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I agree with Shasta. I'm not ready to have a fight, and I agree with Paul. And it seems to me that this is taking a position is consistent with the position you've already taken, which is the letter that went forward and has been used in a number of committees and so on and so forth. So not to take a position on it seems like it would be inconsistent now. So I have one other question for you that has to do with the administration's response. Have you heard anything back from USDA or Forest Service on the EIS?
Reed?
We have not had a response from USDA or Forest Service beyond just sort of acknowledging the receipt.
Okay, thank you, Kat. Anything else? Okay, I've got two more. I've got Reno first and then Luke. Reno?
God, I'm the worst person with mute. I've been getting teased about it just mercilessly by people. But, you know,
Hold on, someone needs to go on mute that's talking right now.
They're out of the picture now. Yeah, I just want to say thanks, for just getting us to this point. Rick, to you, to definitely to Amy too, who started this process of a common sense approach to just how horrible this is. We're all in this for historic preservation. We are not here to empower copper mine companies to destroy historic resources. And so, I think that we need to take a careful look at this and 1884, thank you, and look at how we, how we're interacting with this with the U.S. Forest Service and the efforts that they have made and haven't made. And I think that we've been really clear about this, and staff has done a hell of a job of educating us, the pros, the cons, what's not, right? And I just think that, it is our responsibility to get out in front of these things when given the opportunity. I can't think of a more destructive project in my, I'm only 25 years old, but if I was 47, then I would not be able to think of a more destructive project that has come up in my lifetime. And with that, I would say that I cannot think of a more appropriate opportunity for us as human beings, as citizens, as not ethically challenged individuals to get in front of this, and as a council show support for these two acts that would permanently stop this attempt to just commit an atrocity. So like Shasta said, I'm willing to do what we need to do and help. And Rick, thanks for your leadership on this. Again, that needs to be called out. It's greatly appreciated. So with that, I would ask that hopefully you all would be of the same opinion to support these acts. Thank you.
Thank you, Reno. And I'll just touch quickly. I had the opportunity to visit my daughter who moved to Arizona, northeastern part of the state, for Thanksgiving. And as someone that's always been East Coast and never gone West, it really does open your eyes to the beauty of that part of the country. And to me, this felt like someone, a giant with a big knife just went in there and was scarring the earth, and all of the impact, natural, cultural, historic, environmental, everything. There's just nothing positive other than maybe a little bit of copper that they would have pulled out of here, but not a good project, not a good project. The last person I have right now is Luke on the line. Luke?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Just a quick comment. I know time is running late. Just in case anyone's not aware, academic history organizations like the American Historical Association and the Organization of American Historians both based in Washington, often take positions on legislation like this and are almost always looking for partners. And so it might be that they could join with us, we join with them, or they'd be provided with the right information so they can make their own statements and take their own position on this. So certainly, I think there are other allies out there like AHA and OAH that you might want to look into.
That's a great suggestion, Luke. Reed, I hope we can do something like that. Reed?
Yeah, that's interesting. We'll connect with you, Luke, and sort of learn a little bit more about that. That's intriguing. If I could, Mr. Chairman, I guess before we conclude on this, let me just make a few points. One is, I think, certainly the discussion about whether we should opine on this legislation has been instructive. But I want to be clear. I think staff has approached this from the beginning with the with the strong belief that we really should and must opine on this legislation. I think part of what we wanted to do today was to hear from you about the timing. As Drew indicated earlier, typically by the time we opine on legislation, there's a clearer understanding of whether it's got legs, whether it's likely to go forward, or whether it's one of several bills or what have you. So I think certainly, we recognize that there may be some advantage to thinking a little bit further about the timing of opining on this legislation. What we wanted to do today was to get the sentiment of the committee, both on sort of those points, but also, I think, I'll throw this out one more time, whether there is a comfort or discomfort on opining about a certain provision in this legislation, because we typically don't do that. I mean, for the most part, our comments are about a bill. But I think in this circumstance, given the point that Drew has made, that there are parts of this bill that we may, or the combined bills that we may not want to opine on, are there any concerns about us sort of targeting our comments on specific provisions within these bills?
We're allowed to, right? We can do this?
Absolutely, I would say so. It's not something we've done often, but we certainly could.
Then full speed ahead. And like Drew suggested, on those items that we shouldn't be commenting, let's do it that way. I think you've heard everybody kind of like in favor of that, And another thing, one last thing that bothered me about this case when I read it the first time was the pressure that was put on the Arizona SHPO. Okay, I mean, that is reckless. That is bullying, and those tactics should not occur when you're dealing with something as special as this state and this condition here on the special, unique tribal land. So, Ramona, welcome to the club. We got to find a way when we have 50 SHPOs, I would imagine, or no?
59, including the territories.
With the
Puerto Rico.
Oh, good. So we got a couple of extra ones too. So we need to find a way to come up and help when a SHPO is under pressure by a corporation or a developer or something that just doesn't make any sense. We need to find a way to come to their support so that the chamber, I'm a big Chamber of Commerce member myself, so but there are certain things that shouldn't happen the way they happened, like what happened to him in this particular case. Kate, you have your hand up, yes?
Yeah, yes, I'm a little unclear about where we've ended with this. It seems like there's a lot of support for commenting, but it sounds like Reed, you and Drew aren't, and the acting chair aren't prepared to comment yet. So do you anticipate a vote, an undissembled vote for a comment?
Yeah, what I would anticipate, first of all, two things. One is I think we owe you a bit more information about the bill. What you've received in the meeting book is sort of summary information. And I would not want to ask the members to vote based on the very summary information we provided you today. Again, it's early in the legislative process, and I think we would like to provide you a more complete analysis of the bill and provide, perhaps provide access to each of the bills as well. I think once we do that, our intention would be, as soon as we are, essentially ensured that the bill is likely to go forward, that we will seek formal comments and a vote from the members via an unassembled meeting. Now, I say that assuming that we're going to get to that issue sooner rather than later. On the other hand, if things don't gel and come together until July, we could certainly do it at the next business meeting. But presuming that the timeline sees this bill moving forward sooner rather than later, my inclination would be to move to an unassembled meeting to have the members actually vote on it.
We also generally have to, particularly for our federal members who have to brief this up, the chain of command, as it were, we need to let them know, in advance that a vote is probably going to be happening at a council meeting. That gives them that opportunity to work,
and most
internally.
Right,
That didn't happen
and most of the federal agencies will either will abstain if the administration has not issued an opinion on, it has not given their position on it. So, it's we kind of walk a fine line with legislation like that. So, we'll keep our eyes out, Reed.
Right, and
yeah, go ahead, Drew.
Point about timing. Even if we were in a position to vote today, since there is no statement of administration policy, many of the federal agencies may, as Teresa was just saying, abstain in that situation. But the bottom line is we still haven't even given the federal agencies a chance to really, brief this up the chain because we weren't prepared to vote on it today.
Mr. Vice Chairman, I think we have the sentiment of the members here, and I'm happy to work with Drew to provide that additional information and develop plans for when we would present this to the members.
That sounds excellent, Reed. Reed, would it be fair to say that when we got involved and it was going south, right? I mean, the SHPA was getting, manhauled and everybody, weren't we one of like the first groups to say this is madness?
Yeah, well, let me just say, you're absolutely right, and Ramona knows this well, that SHPAs can be subject to pressure by the governor that they report to or whomever, and we certainly understand that can be the case. I think that's one of the benefits in a consultation like this to having the ACHP involved. We're more removed. We're not subject to that local state pressure, and we can convey those messages sometimes more freely than the SHPO can. So that's one of the advantages of our involvement in these circumstances. It's one of the reasons why not only we thought we could, but frankly, we thought we should take that position.
That's right.
Because we recognize that there were very serious impacts to very important historic properties, and we were in a position to counter that. I will acknowledge that I think there were a large number of organizations in addition to the tribes. There were, the Society for American Archaeology and other organizations that took similar positions. But frankly, I mean, I would like to think that our voice, perhaps reverberated even more loudly when we took that formal position.
I thought it was great. Thank you, Reed. Okay, we want to move on to the next, but I see two hands. So very quickly, Teresa and then Kat, and then we'll move on.
I'm sorry, I forgot to put my hand down.
Okay, Kat?
To get back to something that Paul said earlier, that one of the statutory directives to the ACHP is to advise the Congress. It's also to advise the president. So have you thought about advising the administration about supporting the bill?
Well, I think one, we could certainly ensure that any comments that we develop to the Congress are shared at the right level in the administration. Frankly, I think it's an interesting idea to consider whether a second letter or sort of additional comments might go to the administration. We will most definitely ensure that the Secretary of Agriculture is aware. But I would be open to any member input, CAC, you or anyone else, on how we might convey that further to the administration as well.
That would be wonderful, Kat. Absolutely. We've been in contact with the new Secretary of the Interior. So any other ideas, Reed has my electronic signature, so let's do it, right? Let's move it.
Let me just also point out, Rick, just to add that detail, we did share the letter with Secretary of the Interior and asked for her to support its recommendations as well.
Remember, folks, this is my first and last meeting, so you've got a couple more months to do whatever you think we need to do. And you can blame it on me after it's all over. All right, last committee, my favorite one, the little engine that could, the Communications, Education, and Outreach, the CEO of the ACHP. I want to really thank this group, this working group, and the Oversight Committee doing what is very close to my heart, engaging youth, right? I just turned 60, and most of us here look like, except for Reno, right? He's 27. The rest of us look like we're in our 40s, 50s, and 60s. We need the teenagers, the 20-year-olds, and the 30-year-olds to become historic preservationists. Reno's people, right, Reno? So this is a very important program. Reaching out, I talk to students all the time. I hope all of you do that too. When you get a chance, tell them, historic preservation is a fun thing to do. I also, as an architect, I say, it's like being a detective. You get to go in there, whether you're doing archaeology or historic building restoration, and you look around, right, Paul? You dig around and you find these little building things that are amazing to put back together. So let's continue to engage our youth. I was very fortunate on March 31st with our staff to introduce the new webinar series. We have 4 of these seminars with our historically Black colleges and universities, students and their professors. This was an excellent way during COVID, right, to do a Zoom webinar to connect with our students from across the country. And I'll tell you, our staff did a great job. Over 90 kids signed up from, I think 24 universities and colleges from around the country, and it was really well done. The students were amazing. I told Reed this week I want 1 or 2 of those students to come work as interns this summer down in Florida. So it's also for selfish reasons, right? To get these youth involved in our profession. So the CEO committee had a good discussion about these efforts during last month's meeting. And so I think I'd like to turn over here in our last section to Luke to give us a walkthrough on both what we've done to date and what's being planned in the future. Luke?
Well, thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I think your comments are exactly right about young people. I think we're all hoping they'll take care of us one day.
Yes.
Hi again, everybody. Luke Nichter, Chairman of Communications, Education, and Outreach Committee. Thank you for joining us today and sticking with us today in this late hour about engaging young people in historic preservation. I think we're hoping to use our allotted time here for a few updates, and then also open the floor up for your comments, discussions, and suggestions. Much of the feedback that we've received in the March CEO committee call centered on ways to bring a younger audience into historic preservation, specifically high school and middle school students of that age. At the same time, the ACHP is working hard to bring students and young people of color into the preservation space at that young age. You have a paper in your packet that begins on the electronic version on page 24, titled Engaging Youth and Building a More Inclusive Preservation Program, which will provide a little bit more information for some of our points today. This effort is really complementary to the ACHP's work to build a more inclusive preservation program. And there are several other efforts underway at this time designed to meet these goals within CEO. The ACHP is looking forward to continuing the strong partnership with the National Park Service and the National Trust for Historic Preservation in 2022 with another year of preservation in practice. We will keep you posted as the planning process moves forward with those. OCEO, the Office of CEO, has also created, as just mentioned, a series of 4 webinars for students of HBCUs. And I'm going to turn it over to Susan for a few minutes to tell us a little bit more about those beyond what Rick just introduced.
Thank you, Luke. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see your faces today. The ACHP launched a webinar series which began on March 31st, the first of 4 webinars to students at HBCUs studying architecture, construction management, and landscape architecture to provide an introduction to these students to historic preservation. We also opened up the webinar to minority serving institutions. The goal of that series is to show students at these HBCUs that preservation intersects with the career fields that I just mentioned, as well as many more. As we should have anticipated, but didn't think about, there was a lot of sharing of this information with other schools, other adults and students. And since that was the case, we welcomed everyone who expressed interest in the first webinar. So we had attendees from several minority serving institutions. We had students of history and urban and community planning as well. An interesting development was that faculty and leadership at the HBCUs were determined to participate in these webinars. So of course we welcome them too. We also had an inquiry from a woman in Texas whose niece is in high school and who is interested in attending Texas A&M in 2 years to join their College of Architecture. And that speaks directly to several comments that were made in our last conversation about reaching out to high school students. We did have a large number of participants join the first webinar, not including the panelists. The next webinar on April 28th will feature Joy Beasley, Associate Director of Cultural Resources, Partnerships and Science at the National Park Service, and Dr. Glenn Eskew, Professor of History at Georgia State University. Glenn is also the lead of the Georgia State University World Heritage Initiative, and among other things, he is working on a potential serial nomination of US civil rights movement sites. So I know the students are going to be very excited to hear from both speakers. I'm looking forward to our discussion. Luke?
Thanks, Susan. One of the next items we're working on, following an earlier suggestion from Vice Chairman Gonzalez, I think actually he and I made the suggestion independently around the same time, which means it must be a good one. We've been brainstorming on ways that OCEO might create a kind of youth award focused on historic preservation on these achievements of young people or youth groups. One of the things we've reached out to is considering possible partners for such an award. We recently reached out to National History Day, which, as you might know, already has an annual series of history-related awards that are focused on our target age group here, middle school and high school students, to determine if a partnership with an organization like History Day might be possible on several fronts, everything from a joint project or program or summer workshop. Another possibility could be teaming up on an award, creating whether one of their existing awards and expanding its scope, or whether creating partnering on a new type of award that would be added to the awards that they already award and provide each year. And so that's going on right now, kind of just got started, and we'll keep you posted as that discussion moves forward too. And then one last thing I want to talk about is as part of our overall social media plan for Historic Preservation Month in May, which is coming up soon, we will also be doing a special campaign, which we are calling Rediscovering America. And the idea behind Rediscovering America is that as historic sites, museums, and archives start to gradually reopen, or at least make plans to reopen, including our very own National Building Museum, which you can be seeing in the back, especially Reed's background on Zoom. If you haven't visited, it's a great place to go. One of the most unique museums in all of Washington. We're beginning to make a plan. I think certainly in the hospitality industry, we're expecting a small boom in domestic travel later this year as visitors return and discover and rediscover many of our historic sites. So we're planning a special social media campaign featuring on a weekly basis kind of a strategically chosen list of historic sites, information about them, how to visit them, explore them, and learn more about them. And of course, many of these will be chosen because they're 106 success stories as well. And then I think what we really hope to hear from in terms of members who are still with us here in the meeting is to get additional guidance on possibilities of suggestions on things we've already raised here. But of course, other ideas that you might have specifically in terms of outreach to high school and middle school students. In addition, it'd be great to hear from members if they're aware within their own agencies or past efforts on their own to reach these groups and how ACHP might work specifically with these agencies or other partnerships that you're aware of. These efforts might also include updating the 2016 Youth Strategic Plan, which we discussed during the committee call as part of those papers that came with that last month, in order to update this, the possibility of updating this plan to reflect current interests and priorities within the ACHP and of course the Biden administration. And so I think with that, Susan and I would like to open the floor to comments and suggestions from members.
Thank you, Luke. And Susan, very much thanks to you for organizing that first webinar with the hiccups and everything. But I would just, I mean, if any of you could just go back and watch that video, right, Susan? I mean, in particular, that we had a young African-American girl student from Mobile, Alabama. We had a young man intern who interned with Bob Gibson out west, hands-on internship. And of course, Bob is amazing. And the professor, right? I mean, I've been doing this for 30 some years. I've never connected a historic preservation PowerPoint presentation using the civil rights movement and projects, and this professor it just was a mind blow to hear him talk about, right, Susan, each individual location and projects that he'd done. And it was just fantastic. So please keep doing a great job with those webinars. They were excellent. I hope you can all see it. We have a couple of hands up. I see Ann Walker. Ann?
Yes, sorry I missed the introduction in the beginning. What I always hear from the students that attend the Preserve America Youth Summit is, do you have a youth advisory council? Are you discussing what to do with youth, but not asking youth how to do it? So I would offer some of our alumni to chime in on that, or can connect you to some in Texas and in Colorado and Montana, because they're the ones that can really say, as your students who participate in the webinar, how to reach them. I think the award, the History Day tie-in, is a great idea. We tried to do that before, and we did it with teachers through the advisory council, but it would be great to do it for students because students really track that. And it could be like the push that several of us were involved in when the Boy Scouts got an historic preservation badge, and you didn't think those kind of things would be possible to, get a historic preservation award through History Day. But it's a good avenue to reach students. But I guess a big plug, I would say, as I'm carrying the voice of the many students that I have interacted with, is they say, well, don't talk about, how to reach to youth without asking us. And so I would volunteer some students to participate, Luke, maybe in a meeting with you or in a next committee meeting, or perhaps even to give a brief presentation to the whole council.
Thank you, Ann. And again, Susan has done a great job. We've heard from a couple of comments too, in terms of other states too. Ramona was sharing some comments on that too. Definitely reach out to the state and even at the local level too, to make this thing grow as quickly as possible. Next hand I have up is Michael Brennan, and then Jordan, and then Kat.
Yes, I'd just like to share something that we've had success in the department, and I'm sure your agencies, maybe not in your historical preservation yet, have utilized the Department of State's Virtual Student Federal Service Intern Program. It's free, and we've had programs supporting our VA Historian and History Office, doing a Today in History presentation. There's been some really good stuff, as well as the NCA History Program for our National Cemeteries Association. Oh, wow. Our intent is to tap into that for our historic preservation program this fall, but I just share that. It's been really successful with some motivated students, and I think that's a free resource that's already in an established program.
Thank you, Michael. Jordan, you had your hand up, and then Kat.
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts. One of the more creative processes in 106 is the memo of agreement and coming up with creative stipulations. And oftentimes I've looked for ways in which to involve young people in that process. Sometimes it could be learning about archaeology under careful supervision, of course. But involved, or if there's a local archaeological society. And I think developing as I've said for other topics we talked about, some standard stipulations for involving young people that could be inserted in a memo of agreement might be very helpful, particularly when you're dealing with a consulting party that has deeper pockets or whatever. But I think that that's something that we could look at. I'm glad that Anne mentioned the Boy Scout Merit Badge. I actually worked on that in 1976 for the bicentennial. I go back that far. I don't know whether Girl Scouts have one too, but that would be a good thing to look into. And then a personal experience, and I don't know if this is still a program, but when I was in high school, you know, this is all about me.
In 1976?
Memory lane, right? Memory lane, I wish. There was a program, I grew up in Morristown, New Jersey. It was called the American Civilization Institute of Morristown. It was a government-supported program that took kids in AP history courses in high school and combined them with folks that were archaeologists, historians, and involved them in historic preservation. And that really is how I got that started my interest in this field. It might be worth, and there was the university that we partnered with was affectionately called, where we lived, Fairly Ridiculous, but it's Fairleigh Dickinson University. And so something like that might be interesting to see where that, look a bit into that history of that program, and might we suggest something like that where a university could partner. And then of course that would involve the council as well.
Hey, Jordan. Good.
Yeah, so those are some ideas that I've come up with, and I just think this is what you've done here, Susan and Luke, is terrific. I'm
Yes.
really impressed with that. So keep up the good work.
Thank you, Jordan. Our last comment, Kat?
Sure, thank you very much. The value, Mr. Chairman, of having alumni is that some of us still remember things that happened before. And back in the Preserve America days when things were going well, as I recall, the ACHP had a relationship with Gilder Lehrman, which is an Institute of History. And they came up, I think Anne mentioned this, they came up with the History Teachers Award. It could be that reaching out to Gilder Lehrman again would be a fruitful thing to do. They put a lot of money behind it, and they still give that Teachers Award. In the Teachers Award, they give away a $10,000 prize to the American Teacher of the Year, but they also provide to those teachers who make it out of the state pool get $1,000. And I think that putting a cash prize behind it could inspire more children to get involved in this as well. And so I think if we've still got contacts with Gilder Lehrman, it would be worthwhile to reach back and see who's there and whether we could make something happen again. And if you don't, Susan, it could be that one of our alumni still has contacts with Gilder
Thanks,
Lehrman.
CAC. We have reached out to Gilder Lehrman yearly for the past 3 years. And I believe that it may have, am I on mute? Oh no. And it may have something to do with the fact that Preserve America isn't so strongly involved anymore, but we have not been involved in the program. Happy to reach out to them again, though, of course. Thank you.
Well, one of the other things to consider is that, as I recall, when Preserve America was doing it, the first Lady Bush was very involved in the award and giving out the award.
Yeah.
And so perhaps it's timely, since First Lady Biden is a teacher, an educator, to reach out to her office and see whether there's a relationship that we could forge with that.
Now that is a really excellent idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Susan. Trying to stay here on time. We're 5 minutes over the finish line, but that's okay. Are there any members with any new business? No one on page 1, no one on page 2. Okay. All righty. So I'll remind you all that dates were suggested by Chairwoman Georgiani for July and November business meeting. Hopefully everybody's getting their shots, and if not, get your shots. So that we can try to get in person again, right? And have a cocktail after this meeting, right? It would be nice. So, and in DC, right? Or like in December when we did it across the river. So that's the goal, you know, maybe partially in person in July, not July, in November. Obviously, it depends on whether we have a new chairperson and adjusting to their schedule, and maybe adjusting it to August and early December if necessary. So I don't see, usually Robert's rules, there's a motion to adjourn, Reed, or we just kind of check out? Motion to adjourn?
I think you can ask for that.
Okay, it's not on my talking points, but motion to.
I move we adjourn.
Everyone. All right.
Second it.
All right. Okay, everybody, have a great day and we'll talk to you all soon.